In this weird and wonderful and slightly wacky world that I find myself working in, there's a few common words and phrases that are used. Now, if you ask 10 different people for their definitions of what they mean, the chances are you'll get 10 slightly different responses. Now, although there are some obviously wrong answers to how you define these terms, in many areas the water's actually quite muddied, and it's not about being right or wrong or dogmatic on a definition. It's about making sure you've got alignment and clarity with all the stakeholders you're working with within your organisation, so that expectations are managed and you don't frustrate people by promising what they think is A and you turn up delivering E. In this video, I'm going to share my definitions and how I think they all fit together, with the hope that someone out there can take this, and if they're not sure, it may crystallise your thinking to better support the conversations you're having to educate people internally and get them aligned on the same definitions. We have culture. Then there's employee value proposition, which some people call employer value proposition. Not sure of the difference. We also have employer branding. And then don't forget, we've got talent marketing. Now, where does one end and the next one begin? How do they connect? How do they feed into each other? It's all very confusing. And the more people you ask, the more confusing it can get. Because, as I said, people have different definitions. So these are mine, and I'm giving an overview of how I think it all comes together. Now, a bit of context. Many years ago, when I was at Tesco head office, I went in to do employer branding and talent marketing, and that quickly evolved into EVP, which then quickly evolved into culture transformation and learning and development and leadership development. So I might be a bit biased here, but I fundamentally believe that culture sits at the heart of everything. If your culture is rotten, everything else decays. Now, I don't believe that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I used to think that, but then a good LinkedIn friend and an ex-colleague of mine, Henry Oliver, educated me and opened my eyes. And he says, which is brilliant, I wish this was my thinking, but I'm not as smart as him. And he said, if you ask any economist, if you want to be able to predict human behaviour, all you need to do is look at the incentives or punishments on offer. And he says, with strategy, you'll have goals and KPIs, key performance indicators. And at the end of those KPIs will be incentives, usually cash bonuses or rewards, or there'll be punishments. In worst cases, people lose their jobs if they don't hit targets, especially in sales, for example. So it's not as simple as saying culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you look at it like that, which logically makes perfect sense, because behaviour is a key driver of culture, then you can see why they have to work together, and it's not one kind of being the carnivore of the other. So that's really important to understand. But what is culture? I touched on a part of it. It's a really big question. For me, it's everything and nothing. And then I hear myself say that, and I think, well, what the bloody hell does that mean? That's even more confusing. So it's how people behave, it's how they communicate, it's how they interact with each other, either internally or their suppliers, when there aren't guidelines or rules to tell people how to do that. And I think, not that I would recommend this, but you often see the true culture of an organisation when there's a crisis. Because that tells how people, do they come together? Do they collaborate? Can they still laugh and see the funny side? Or does it become quite combative and quite bitchy and a blame culture? So it's all those things. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but you can sense it. You can observe it, I guess, in small doses. Now, under your culture is your values. And driving your values is your behaviours. Going back to that point that my friend Henry Oliver mentioned about strategy, incentives will drive behaviours, behaviours linked back to the culture. So that's culture. I hope that's clear. Then you've got employee value proposition. Some call it employer. I'm not sure of the difference. I call it employee because I think you put the customer at the heart. And in this context, the employee or the candidate is the customer. For some, this is the give and the get. If you're working in this business or you're applying for this business, this is what you want. This is what we want you to give us, and this is what you get in return. Now, some argue that the EVP should just focus on the get because the give is covered elsewhere ad nauseum. It's on job ads. You need to give us this. It's on the job description, the same. It's in the interviews. I mean, let's face it, 90% of interviews is the company saying to the candidate, you need to give us this, prove that you can. And when you get in the business, it's in competency frameworks. Sometimes those are used for promotional purposes. What level are you in the competency framework? Because you need to demonstrate you can give this at this capacity, at this competence level to progress your career. So EVP, and I can see why this, in the attraction phase at least, should focus on this is what you get in return to make it compelling for people to want to join you and put their hat in the ring to do so. This is the logical part of the equation. I'm going to steal an analogy from Marcus Body. Vicky Saunders has a great one too. If you prefer chocolate, go and find hers. But if you're buying a house, you have a checklist of things you want: number of rooms, parking, good transport links, good schools nearby. And you can go and visit 10 properties. They all tick those boxes, but something instinctive, it comes from the gut, you just don't want any of them. Logically, great, they have everything you desire, but something you can't put your finger on, it's just not right. Now, in employment, those logical things is things like pay and your perks, your bonuses and whatever else might be in there. It's prospects to grow, prospects to develop, prospects to advance your career, but also prospects of the company too. If it's a tech company, what's the roadmap for the tech? Is it exciting? Does it have a good reputation? Because if I'm a developer, I want to know if my job's going to be easy or difficult. Is it going to be fun? Am I going to be on the latest tools, the latest languages? Is the roadmap exciting? Or if I'm in sales, does the product have a good reputation? Because to a certain extent, I'm coin operated and I want the path of least resistance. So is it going to be an easy sell or a hard sell? So the prospects works from an individual basis and also about the company or the product services that it sells. Is it a positive environment? Are the people friendly? Is it collaborative? Is it flexible working? Whatever that might be in terms of positive environment. Are people recognised? Are they rewarded? Do they feel seen, heard? That kind of thing. And then it's those cultural pillars like I've talked about. What's the culture like? What are the values of the organisation? And what are the behaviours that they try and drive to make all that a reality? Then we get on to employer brand. Now, some people will disagree with me here, but for me, employer branding is in a big part taking all those logical things, taking that culture and creating a creative identity and a tone of voice that makes people think and feel certain things about you that align to what you are from your culture and your value proposition. It's the emotional part of the equation. So, for example, going back to the house, you've walked into 10 properties, they've had all those things on the checklist that you're after, but none of them are doing it for you. You walk into house number 11, they have the same things, and for some reason, this is it. This is the one. If you've been in that situation, you'll know what I mean. The heart knows what the heart wants. And the purpose of branding through your creative identity, through your tone of voice, through the stories you tell, all branded consistently. When people see you out in the wild, every time they see you, you're just having a positive mental priming effect. So when they're looking for a role, they could be looking at you and 5 other companies who are very similar, but for some reason you stand out. You all pay the same money, you're all in the same industry, you're all of a similar size, you're all in a similar location. So logically, you're ticking all those boxes, but for some reason you stand out. And it's because you've been able to get into the psyche of people in a positive way. So when they have to make that final transactional decision, do I accept an offer or not, it's less of a mental somersault that they need to take. And finally, you have your talent marketing. And this is basically the coordinated distribution of that brand, of that content, through stories, through job ads, etc., etc. There's a great analogy that I heard recently, which you may have seen maybe on TikTok or on Instagram stories. And this young lady says, if a circus is coming to town, and you have people go to that town and ask people questions in the town and say, do you want the circus? And they say, yes, we'd like the circus. You go, right, that's research. If you then create a poster, that poster is advertising. If you put that poster on the butt of an elephant and that elephant walks through the town, that's promotion. And if he starts juggling some balls and some people, whatever, acrobats jump off its trunk and the newspaper writes about it, that's PR. And the town members find it funny and you get a good report, that's PR. And if you've got people going around the elephant telling people about the food stalls and the other acts and the other events that are going to be around the circus, that's sales. And the coordination of all of that over a defined period of time, all of that is marketing. And it's the same for talent marketing. Again, I wish that was my thinking. I've stolen it from somebody else, but I think that sums it up in a nice, neat nutshell for people to get their head around what talent marketing is. All the events you book, the social media that you're doing, programmatic, it's doing it in a coordinated fashion with a clear objective which helps you go and achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. So that's it, really. And really importantly, as far as I'm concerned, it has to come from the inside out. You can't start with a brand that you've made up out of thin air. This is different to consumer marketing. In employer branding, it is about making sure it is reflective and representative of the culture and the value proposition of your organisation. And then you communicate that through your coordinated marketing to attract the people who won't just want to start at your organisation, but when they get there, they want to strive, thrive, stay and succeed. So I hope that helped. If you agree or disagree, I'd love to have the discussion and the debate in the comments, whether you're seeing this on YouTube or LinkedIn. And as always, I'll see you again soon. Cheers.